would open your Bibles today, Acts chapter 27. Acts chapter 27. And beginning with the 13th verse, you'll notice these words. When a light wind began blowing from the south, the sailors thought that they could make it. So they pulled up anchor and sailed close to the shore of Crete. But the weather changed abruptly, and a wind of typhoon strength called a northeaster burst across the island and blew us out to sea. The sailors couldn't turn the ship into the wind, so they gave up and let it run before the gale. We sailed along the shelter side a small island named Cauda, where with great difficulty we hoisted aboard the lifeboat being towed behind us. And then the sailors bound ropes around the hull of the ship to strengthen it. They were afraid of being driven across the sandbars of Sardis off the African coast, and so they lowered the sea anchor to slow the ship and were driven before the wind. The next day, as gale-force winds continued to batter the ship, the crew began throwing the cargo overboard. And the following day, they took even some of the ship's gear and threw it overboard. The terrible storm raged for many days, blotting out the sun and the stars until at last all hope was gone. No one had eaten for a long time, and finally Paul called the crew together and said, "Men, you should have listened to me in the first place and not left Crete. You would have avoided all this damage and loss. But take courage. None of you will lose your lives, even though the ship will go down. For last night an angel of God to whom I belong and whom I serve stood beside me and said, 'Don't be afraid, Paul, for you will surely stand trial before Caesar. What's more, God in his goodness has granted safety to everyone sailing with you. So take courage, for I believe God. It will be just as he said, but we will be shipwrecked on an island.'" I want to talk to you for a few moments from the subject, surviving shipwrecks. Surviving shipwrecks. Life has a way of throwing you curves that you couldn't expect, because you can't always plan for storms. If a storm is coming next month, you really don't know. There are certain things that could come up in your life and you have no idea. But one thing that Paul knew, the Apostle Paul was standing trial before King Agrippa, and he made the mistake of making an appeal to Caesar, because his appeal before King Agrippa had been so compelling that King Agrippa said, "You almost persuaded me. I was almost converted by your persuasion." And he says, "I would have let you go had you not appealed to Caesar, but you appealed to Caesar. Now I've got to send you to Rome." And so this is why Paul is on a ship on his way to Rome so that he can stand trial before Caesar. And he's in this process. And he stood up and said, before they left, Paul said, "I perceive that this voyage, this trip is going to be with danger." Paul said, I feel something ain't right about this. We're going to have a hard time. This is going to be trouble. And they blew him off. And then they got out there and got in the worst storm. And that's why Paul couldn't resist the temptation when he said, I told y'all. I told y'all. Paul had to go there because he told them ahead of time. And then once they were in one of the worst storms of their life, Paul had an experience. An angel of the Lord stood by him and said to him, "You're going to be delivered safely to Rome, because you've got to stand before Caesar." And the life of every person who's with you, there were 276 people on board the ship, all of them were safe. And it went according to the word of the Lord. But they went through a terrible storm that wrecked the ship. And so they were shipwrecked on an island. And in this day and time, there are all kinds of storms that hit our lives unexpectedly. You know, a storm is wind out of order. A storm is water out of order. A storm is earth out of order. A storm, when the earth gets out of order, is called an earthquake. When it's wind out of order, you know, wind normally blows from west to east. But when it's a storm, it can blow from east to west, north to south, south to north. It can take any direction. We don't understand it. It's wind that is out of order. That's a storm. It's a storm is a sign of disorder, of things going on. And there are all kinds of storms, financial storms. There are relational storms. There are spiritual storms. You can be in some demonic warfare. There are spiritual storms. There are familial storms between husband and wife, between son and daughter, between brother and sister. There are physiological storms that you can have things going on in your own body, a storm on the inside of your own physical body. There are psychological storms. There are emotional storms. And things, people feel a war going on the inside. But let me say this to you. Obedience does not exempt you from the storm. It keeps you safe amid the storm. Let me say that again. Obedience does not exempt you from the storm, but it keeps you safe amid the storm. When you obey God, there is a blessing in obeying God. When you just obey God, there's a blessing in obedience. And oftentimes, you can assume that if I obey God, nothing bad will ever happen to me. No. You can be right in the center of God's will and go through a storm. So obedience does not exempt you from a storm, but obedience will keep you safe amid the storm. When you obey God, you might have the worst storm of your life. You can have an emotional storm, you can have a psychological storm, a physiological storm, a spiritual storm, but if you obey God, He's the master of the storm. You know, He knows all of these things, and so He'll keep you safe amid the storm, but it doesn't mean that He's going to keep the storm from coming. And whenever a storm comes, storms have this tendency to create pain for us. Storms create pain. I mean, you hate when a storm comes and tears something up, and now you got to call an insurance adjuster out there. It's just painful if you get physically injured, if your house gets injured, if your business gets injured, if something gets injured because of a storm, if your relationship goes through a storm and you go through a separation, that injury, that causes emotional pain in your life. Anybody know anything about pain? Anybody ever been through a storm in their life before? They come without warning. Some storm, you can wake up in a storm. You can wake up in a storm. The noise of the storm can awaken you. So you don't get warnings about all kinds of storms that can happen. You can be awakened. You know, we had an earthquake in Atlanta a few years ago. Some people felt it over in the middle of the night. Now, it wasn't strong enough to wake the bishop. The Bible says He gives His beloved sleep. Sound sleep. But storms create pain. And I want you to realize there are two types of pain. One that hurts you and one that changes you. There are two types of pain. One hurts you, one changes you. There's a pain that God can use to change you. It's not to hurt you. Sometimes God will put He'll put us in a hole. You know how sometimes when a person has you and they're trying to get you to do something, they put your arm behind their back and then they turn it up. And they're like, say uncle, say. They're trying to get you to do something. And see, there are times when God is trying to get our lives to be shifted in a certain position. He puts us in an awkward position. Now, He's eternal. He can beat us at the waiting game. You can try to run from God. You can be rebellious against God. But you know your arm is behind your back. And He's like, I'm going to take it. I'll go as long as you can. I'll jack it up some more. And then eventually we end up having to tap out. And some people don't tap out until their 50s and their 60s. Some of them be 78, you know. But He will always beat you at the waiting game. He will always beat you. Some change, it comes to hurt you. Others comes to change you. It comes to change you. Whenever God allows a pain, it's to change you. It's to change you. It's not to hurt you. He's not trying to hurt His children. He's trying to change us. He's simply trying to change us. Because you know there's some hard-headed people. I mean, they will let you bend their thumb all the way back, and they're like, okay. They'll be looking at you like, that's all you got? Some people have a high tolerance for pain. And that's why it can last so long, because they won't change until the pain becomes unbearable. Until you get sick and tired of living from hand to mouth. Until you say, you know what, this is just no way for me to live. And until you get sick of that. But as long as you are tolerant of that, it'll keep on happening. So God lets some pain come. There's a pain that hurts you, and then there's a pain that changes you. But whenever you're in a storm, I want you to realize, when you are committed to God and submitted to God and obedient to God, when you're in a storm, help is on the way and love is already there. Help is on the way and love is already there. Even if you're in a storm, the love of God is already there. The love is not on the way. Help is on the way, but love is already there. You have to just search it out. God's love is already there. His love is already there. And I want to give you some shipwreck survival strategies. Because, listen, either you just got out of a storm, or you're in a storm, or you're headed into a storm. It's one or the other. You're going to be in one of those stages. Either you just got out of a storm, or you're in a storm, or you're headed into one. So wherever you are, and this is why I wanted to give you some storm survival strategies, storm survival. Here's number one: tighten. In Acts chapter 27, verse 17, notice it says, then the sailors bound ropes around the hull of the ship to strengthen it. They tightened it, they undergirded it, they strengthened it. You have to tighten things whenever you are in a storm. Tighten, bind it closer together. When your family gets in a storm, bind closer together. There's a tragedy that happens, bind closer together. If you're in a storm in your marriage, don't separate, bind closer together. Get closer together. Don't get on opposite ends of the bed. Embrace. Hold each other. Bind closer together. Tighten the relationship. You're in a financial storm, tighten up your finances. Put down where you're spending every dime, and then you got to tighten it. You got to say, you know what? I can't do this. I'm going to have to save some money here. You have to tighten the budget. You have to tighten it. Whenever you get in a storm, look for areas that can be undergirded, tightened, or strengthened. They ran cords and cables under the ship to tighten it because they were in a storm. They tightened it. When you get in a storm, start tightening stuff. Start tightening stuff. Listen, if you're in a storm in the natural, you have to start tightening stuff. Men have to tighten their hats to their heads because it'll blow off. Women have to tighten their wigs and their weaves because you know a weave will grow out. You got to tighten it. You get in a storm, you know how it works, ladies. Touch your neighbor, say tighten it, tighten it. Your eyes ought to be slanted. Tighten it. But it'll help you in a storm. It'll help you in a storm. I saw a lady getting ready to go in and have her baby. She knew that labor was no joke. She had her hair braided so tight her eyes were slanted. Because she knew she was getting ready to go into a storm. Whenever you're getting ready to face a storm, there's some things that you're going to have to tighten in your life. Tighten. It's a strategy. They ran cables and they tightened the ship. They tightened the ship. So if you get in a storm, tighten your relationship. Your relationship with your spouse, your relationship with your children, your relationship with your mother, your father, your brother, your sister, your relationship with God. Tighten your relationship with your employer. Tighten your relationship. Tighten the ship. Tighten the membership. Tighten the fellowship. You need friends to be able to come around you. You need a tight band of people that are able to help secure you. You need a support system. Because you're in a storm, you got to brace yourself, so you need to tighten things. You need to tighten the house up, put boards over the windows. You need to fasten this down and tie this and secure this. They secured it. So whenever you're in a storm, look for areas that can be tightened in your life. Look for what needs to be tightened. Anything that needs to be tightened, look for it and tighten it. And so here's the question: what do you need to tighten in your life or your walk with God? What is it that you need to tighten in your life or your walk with God, to strengthen, to undergird? What do you need to tighten in your life? Because it's not a matter of whether you'll ever have a storm. Storms come and go. Storms will come. We want to be able to survive the storm. We want to outlast the storm. Here's the second strategy: lighten. The first one is tighten. The second one is lighten. You want to know how to survive shipwreck, you have to lighten. Acts chapter 27 and verse 18, notice this. The next day, as gale force winds continued to batter the ship, the crew began throwing the cargo overboard. You get in a storm, you got to start getting rid of stuff. See, you have to get rid of the non-essentials. You know, if you get in a real financial storm, you have to start putting some stuff on eBay and Craigslist. You're going to have a garage sale. You're going to have to start getting rid of some stuff. You're going to have you have to downsize. You have to get some excess stuff overboard. I'm talking about surviving. Surviving. When you're in a storm, you got to make do until you can do better. You're just trying, how do I survive this? And you got some extra stuff that you can get off of your hands. You need to lighten the ship. The first strategy is to tighten your relationships, tighten the ship, but now it's to lighten. That's to get rid of stuff that you can make without. So you've got to be able to lighten it, because you don't just lose your soul just because you may lose your ship. Don't lose your soul just because you may lose your ship. You tighten and lighten. You tighten and lighten. When you tighten and lighten, tightening and lightening is about knowing what to hold on to and what to let go of. Whenever you're in a storm, you got to know, what do I hold on? What is a non-negotiable? What must I hold on to? And what is it that I can let go of to save our lives? To be able to save this marriage, we got to let go of some stuff. We've got to let go. When you're in survival mode, you're going to have to let go some of the cargo. It's just stuff at the end of the day. It's not you, it's stuff. Don't ever get stuff so attached to you that you lose your identity. You are still going to be you, with stuff or without stuff. You've made it without stuff before, you can make it without stuff again. If you got stuff the first time, you can get more stuff later on. The thing is, when you're in survival mode, they will tell you, every time I get on an airplane, they tell you, in case of an emergency, there are oxygen masks that will drop down. Please secure your own oxygen mask on before trying to help others. You listen, until you help yourself, if you run out of breath, if you run out of inspiration, if you run out of motivation, you won't be able to help anybody else. Secure your own mask. And if there's an event, you know, they tell you where the ramp or the slide will come. They said, listen, don't try to get your laptop, don't try to get your briefcase and your purse. Pull your shoes off, get rid of your stuff, because you're trying to save your life. You have to when you're in a storm and you realize the ship is going down, you got to try to save your life now. You got to try to save your life. You're trying to save your life. So you tighten and lighten. Know what to hold on to and know what to get rid of. I love something that Soren Kierkegaard said. He said, to let go is to lose your foothold temporarily. Not to let go is to lose your foothold forever. You got to know what to let go of. There's some things that you have to let go of. What do you need to let go of? And I want you to think of this, of letting go of certain things. Think of it, you know, like, have you ever seen kids out on the playground on monkey bars? You can't move forward until you let go of what you were hanging on to. And see, I have no capacity to move forward until I let go of what was behind me. And when I let go of this one, then I can reach ahead. But I cannot even reach ahead and still hold on to something that used to be in my past. You got to know how to let go of stuff when you are in a storm. There's some stuff that you have to let go of. God, in fact, sends some storms to blow some stuff out of our way that has clouded our relationship with Him. He brings us back to a dependence on Him. Isn't it amazing that when you get in a storm, you all of a sudden start thinking about God? I mean, you really do. You may not have thought about him in a long time, but if you get in a severe enough storm, you realize this is bigger than me. This is bigger than man. And that's why back in the day, old folks, they used to get around and just, shh, baby, shh, shh. God is doing his work. You just be quiet. People unplug all the appliances. They turn everything off, unplug stuff. Shh. We just be sitting there just. Somebody then quote, God works in mysterious ways, his wonders to perform. He plants his footsteps upon the sea and he rides upon the storm. But there's a storm that's going on. You tighten and you lighten. You tighten and you lighten. This is just a survival. You can't try to hold on to stuff when you're in a financial storm. You might have to let go of a car. You might have to let go of some clothes and some jewelry. You might have to let go of some stuff. I mean, because when it comes down to you, I mean, you can't eat a mink coat. But you got to eat. You're going to have to eat. I know it's cute and it's odd. And you cherish whoever may have given it to you or how you had to work for it. Wink, wink. Here's the third thing that I would say to you in your storm survival. To be able to survive your shipwreck, learn how to battle depression. Learn how to battle depression. Because I want you to see something in Acts chapter 27 here, verse 20. It says, the terrible storm raged for many days. See, some storms are not just a matter of hours. Some of them last days, some last weeks. Blotting out the sun and the stars until at last all hope was gone. That's depression. When it's dark and all hope is gone and you don't see any light for many days, that's deep depression. You have to learn how to battle depression. See, because we don't understand why we experience storm, and we want to know the moment that a storm comes, what did we do wrong? And we want to, here's the question that comes to our minds. Am I being punished for something? We want to know. We get depressed after a storm lasts for too long. You get sick too long, you get depressed. If you're in pain for too long, you get depressed. If you deal with a terrorizing person for too long, you get depressed. So if you're going to be a storm survivor, you're going to have to learn how to battle depression. See, these guys were really depressed. They were depressed. They were depressed. Can I tell you a simple thing that Paul told everybody to do when they were depressed? He said, y'all need to eat something, because they were fasting. He says, you need to eat. I'm irritable when I don't eat. So you need to eat. Feed yourself. Feed your faith and starve your doubts. You got to feed your face and feed your faith. Now let me give you 5 of the best ways that I know to battle depression. Number 1, encourage yourself by remembering God's promises to you. Encourage yourself by remembering God's promises to you. Just encourage yourself by remembering God's promises to you. Here's number 2, exercise. Exercise. Exercise releases positive endorphins that make you feel better. Antidepressant hormones are released in your body when you exercise. Exercise. Start moving. If you just sit there, the more you sit there, the longer you lay there, the worse you feel. You don't feel any better when you just lay there and you sit there. But get up and move, and you start releasing antidepressant hormones in your body. So move. Start reminding yourself, encouraging yourself about the promises of God to you, and then exercise. Number 3, listen to music that connects with your soul, or sing. Music is an antidepressant. People feel better. If you're in a terrible mood, they turn on a certain kind of music that ministers to their soul, they feel better. And if you can sing, sing it. Singing can help take you through storms. How do you think the ancestry of African people endured slavery, they had to have a song. They had a song. And I understand why the caged bird sings. He doesn't sing because he's in a cage. He sings because he has a song. She sings because she has a song. It has no reference to whether the caged bird is caged or free. They sing not because they're free or bound, or bound, but because they have a song. There's always a song of the redeemed. There's always a song. So listen to music that connects with your soul, or sing. Encourage yourself by remembering God's promises to you. Exercise. Listen to music that connects to your soul, or sing. Number 4, help somebody else around you. One of the best ways to cure your own depression is to find somebody in worse condition. It's like, baby, I know we in this shipwreck together, but you all right, baby? You all right? Make yourself the one to check on other folks around you. Help somebody else. I mean, let your blinds up and go across the street and help somebody else who's in the worst condition. Find somebody else and serve, and you'll be surprised how much better that will make you feel. And here's number 5, express thanks for what you have left. Because they can say, well, I was tightening everything, and then, Lord, and I had to throw me in my, Lord, I had to give my coat. My second husband gave me that coat. And I hated to let it go, but I had. Thank God for what you've got left. I'm still alive. I still have my life. I've got my health. I got my strength. I've got the sanity of my mind. I've got encouragement. I got a will to get up and go to work. God, if you ever get me out of this, start reminding yourself of what you have left, what you have left, what you have left. And listen, very, very clearly, sometimes the greatest goal in a storm is simply to outlast it. We take cover until the storm passes. The whole idea is, God, just help me to get through this. Help me to outlast the storm, because the truth of the matter is that no storm lasts forever. Say that with me. No storm lasts forever. It might feel that way, but say it again. No storm lasts forever. It could be for months or weeks and sometimes years, but no storm lasts forever. No storm lasts forever.
Thank you for watching Power for Living with Bishop Dale C. Bronner. Join us again next time for Power for Living, where revelation is power. Power for living.